Hello, everybody. This is Deanna Minnick. Welcome to the Detox Summit. In this interview, we'll be talking with superstar nutrition expert JJ Virgin. JJ is one of the nation's foremost nutrition experts. She's an accomplished public speaker and she's been in the media. She's been in the nutrition field for over 25 years and has had great training in holistic nutrition as well as functional medicine. And as you know, we've been hearing a lot about functional medicine from the different experts. JJ earned her recognition as the go-to weight loss expert who can unlock the door to lifelong weight management through her sensible, no-fail approach to nutrition and fitness. So I feel really honored to have JJ today because I think that she can shed some light on weight loss as it relates to toxicity, and she can come at it from both sides, talking about nutrition and also fitness. And a lot of her ideas are also captured in her New York Times bestseller, The Virgin Diet. And as we know, she's also the author of 6 Weeks to Sleeveless and Sexy. It's almost like every picture I see of JJ, she doesn't have sleeves, and she's extremely buff and really sets a great role model for all of us. So welcome, JJ, to the Detox Summit.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So really would like to know more about, you've got such a great background. You've worked with many people in showbiz. You're a celebrity expert in nutrition and health. So I'm just kind of curious about your personal journey. How did you get to where you are now?
I actually have never not, from the time I can remember, I've never not been into nutrition and health. I grew up in Berkeley, so I have that advantage where farm to table is just like how we roll. But I was raised by a mother from the Midwest who literally, my nickname growing up was Poppy because I ate so many Pop-Tarts. It was like Pop-Tarts, Captain Crunch, and then the dreaded tuna fish casserole with potato chips on top and the Campbell
yes.
soup. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like, yikes. But I got really into, I've always been a fitness person. I did a lot of dance growing up, kind of ballet, gymnastics, and track. All sort of, the ballet and gymnastics were ridiculous because I'm 6 feet tall. But about age 12, I got extremely into nutrition because I really wanted to be better at what I was doing in sports. And I knew that I needed to have the nutrition to do it. And we had health food stores in Berkeley. So I would go to the health food stores and find things, of course, misguided, because as we know, there's so many things in the health food store that aren't healthy, right?
Exactly.
So I was like eating frozen yogurt and carob chips, thinking I was doing a great job. But, it's always been my fascination and interest. I'm just so lucky that I managed to create a career out of what I love.
Mm-hmm. So what did your mother think when you started visiting the health food store and you started to adopt all of these different ways of eating that really went against what she was cultivating from her own upbringing in the Midwest?
Yeah, mom was not happy. And mom still does not buy into what I do. She keeps me humble.
Oh.
I said to her, I go, Mom, because we went to Kauai last summer. Took my kids and my mom, and my mom is telling me how she'd like to lose a few pounds, and she's literally having juice. I'm gonna have a light breakfast, toast and juice, right? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, yikes. And I go, Mom, did you read my book? Right? And she goes, oh, I read a little bit of it. I thought, well, there you go.
Well,
all right, thanks, Mom.
Well, what's that phrase? The prophet is never recognized in his homeland.
Right.
So sometimes we just have to, extract ourselves, and they'll see it in a different way. She'll probably hear it from her friends eventually.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe you can tell us a bit about the Virgin Diet. Tell us about some of the concepts in your book as they relate to weight loss.
Well, what's interesting is it's so perfect for this summit because when you really look at it, one of the key places that you're going to become toxic is with what you're eating and drinking. And this is a different type. I think we think of toxicity in terms of heavy metals and, some of these chemicals and pesticides. But in reality, if you're intolerant to a food, that can create a toxic event in your body. And it's this low-grade toxicity that creates this inflammation that changes hormone responses that makes you better at storing fat, worse at burning it off, raises stress hormones. So it's really a key factor here. So what happened was I became fascinated in what I call weight loss resistance early on in my career. And it was when I was a personal trainer. I was one of the first in the country, gosh, 30 years ago. And I was paying my way through graduate school, helping personal training. And I was in exercise science. And it became very clear to me that you couldn't exercise enough to compensate for a poor diet. Now, we were taught that in order to lose weight, you had to eat less and exercise more. And my key clients back then were 40 to 50 years old, mainly women. And it became really clear really fast that having them eat less and exercise more was not working, right? You know?
Right.
And so I could either choose to be an unemployed personal trainer or figure it out. And so I thought, all right, so clearly I'm not insane. I'm not going to just do more of what's not working. What are the reasons people can't lose weight? And I started looking at all of these things. And at the time, I was actually in doctoral school in exercise science. I took a nutrition course. I went, okay, nutrition really the answer. Then I started down this path. I think that a lot of us in the field have gone down where it's like, all right, I took 40 graduate and doctoral courses, went to all these conferences going, what is it? What is it, right? And, is it gut bacteria? Is it food? Is it stress? Is it sleep? Is it hormones? Is it toxicity? It's like, yes. It's all of these things. But I also looked at, well, what's the biggest thing? What's the first thing? Because we know we have to have a fast result to get in the game. I mean, I used to work with a doc who said, in order to lose weight, you have to get healthy, and it could take 6 months or a year. Well, no one's going to stay motivated that long. They're hearing all these advertisements for these cleanses and programs where you lose 10 pounds in a day, and then you can't say, hey, you know what? At the end of this year, they're going, oh, heck no, I'm going to go give $1,000 to this cleanse program. Forget it. Bye, JJ. So, right? So
exactly.
I looked at like, what is the biggest needle mover? What's the thing we do most often? We eat, right? And what is one of the biggest sources of toxicity and creating these issues of inflammation and cravings and joint pain and headaches and poor energy and weight gain? It's what we're eating. I was working with these doctors doing IgG testing in their offices, and I kept seeing the same foods coming up, and we'd pull them out and they'd feel so much better, but they'd lose weight fast. So that's really the Virgin Diet, looking at the key foods we can become intolerant of, either due to genetics or immune system or hormones, pulling them out for a short period of time, letting your body come back into balance and cool off, and then re-challenging them to customize the diet for the long term.
So really, in essence, doing personalized nutrition and starting off with looking at personalized food triggers. So JJ, what were those foods that kept coming up time and time again that you were looking at the food allergy reports? And are there certain ones that we should all be aware of?
Yeah, and here's the thing. So I was doing something called an IgG test, which is a delayed food sensitivity test. People have heard of food allergies. They're not common, although they're becoming more common, as we know. I think a lot because of GMOs, but they're still rare. Food sensitivities are hugely common. 70% of the time, people showed up with these food sensitivities on these tests, and we don't think about them because you don't think, oh, I ate dairy and I've got a zit the next day, or I ate, eggs and I've got gas and bloating 4 hours later, or I ate corn and I have a headache. You don't put those things together because it's not like you ate something and your throat closed up. It happened anywhere from an hour to 48 hours later, so you don't connect those dots. But, there's also genetic issues with gluten. That's a different way to look at things. There's genetic issues with dairy. There's genetic issues with fructose. There's hormonal issues with different foods, stress, leptin, stress hormones, leptin, insulin. And so there's a variety of ways to look at things. I realized there was no one way to look at it. We were doing IgG testing, and the classic things that showed up 70% of the time it was dairy and eggs. The next tier were soy, wheat, because this didn't look at gluten, soy, wheat, and corn and peanuts. So then I did, with intolerant testing, with gluten testing, we showed about 40% of the time a gluten problem. But I pull everyone off gluten, and 90% of the people feel different being off gluten. So, and I think the other 10% didn't get it out. I think with the type of gluten we have in the US, no one does well with it. And then sugar and artificial sweeteners were different in that when I first started this, I pulled out those 6. And then I realized, because sugar's really going to affect hormones, but it's not a classic intolerance per se. But I had to pull it out. How could you not? you know? So, in fact, my next book is just on sugar, because if you had to pick one needle mover totally, I would pick sugar. Obviously, it's really public enemy number one. But what we saw when we pulled these foods out, again, I do the testing, yank the foods out, all those symptoms people came in it with in a matter of days were gone. And then all of a sudden they were losing weight fast. And what was interesting is, now people do the program a lot for losing weight, but they stay because they feel so much better. They don't want to touch those foods again because they eat them and they go, oh my gosh, I had no idea gluten made my finger swell, or eggs gave me a rash, or, corn gave me headaches. And once they know that, they're like, forget it. It's not worth it.
So what I'm hearing you say, and just to do a recap for the listener, is that if we continually expose our bodies to foods that we might have intolerance to, it'll be much more difficult to lose weight. So that's the overall message, right?
Well, the overall message too is you become intolerant to these foods over time quite often. You might be born with a genetic issue, but a lot of these foods, it's because they are so ubiquitous to our food supply. If you're eating processed foods, corn, soy, gluten, dairy, eggs, peanuts, sugar, artificial sweeteners, they're in everything. So it's the low grade exposure to them over time that, again, makes you crave the very foods that are hurting you, messes with your appetite control. You're hungrier, especially fructose, as we know, does that, nightmare. And then, triggers inflammation, which then creates hormonal issues that you also have hormonal issues with it, but insulin resistance that makes you better at storing fat, elevated cortisol. So yes, it becomes this really bad downward spiral. You're craving the very foods that are hurting you. They're making you store more fat. It's harder for you to burn off fat. So now you're hungrier, just this rotten situation, but you can get out of it quickly.
So JJ, is this because our bodies have changed over time, or is it because our foods have changed, or is it the combination of the two? So what's really creating the issue here? I mean, we've consumed dairy and eggs throughout this past century, the 20th century, and we haven't been hearing about a lot of these food intolerances. So what is happening? Is it the food that's changing, or is it because that we are so stressed that we're changing our physiology in our response to food?
Our food has changed so much in the last 20 to 30 years. It's shocking. Like when you look at how long it really takes to be able to change a body, it's eons. I mean, it's not happening over 20 years. It's happening over 10,000 years. But when you look at what it takes, what we've done with food, just look at the last 30 years, 20 years, as we decided, we've got to watch the fat and things. So they pulled the fat down and we figured out how to make high fructose corn syrup cheap and started throwing that in. And then we decided, we're going to go low carb. So then we started putting soy into everything. Then we started realizing, no, we can genetically modify these things and produce them much cheaper. So when you look at what's happened over the last 20, 30 years, 100 years ago, people would go and have grass-fed raw milk. Like now we've got pasteurized factory milk that's full of pus. It's a whole different food. Pastured eggs are completely different than factory eggs. It's like wild salmon versus farmed salmon. I don't eat farmed salmon. I don't eat factory eggs because they're a fake food. It's like pasteurized milk. Those are just things that don't make any sense. So when you start to dig in here, you go, well, these are not the foods. We might say, we've been eating these for 100 years. No, we haven't. No, we haven't, because there wasn't genetically modified food 100 years ago. So we used to go pick corn. My mother, my Pop-Tart mother, grew up in the Midwest where she walked outside, they picked corn, and then they served it. Now, I still would argue, hey, corn's basically sugar. You start eating it, amylase enzyme breaks it down, sugar, starch turns into sugar, but it's a whole different thing when you're eating a fresh picked ear of corn, and immediately eating it versus a genetically modified piece of corn that's been now, sitting somewhere forever. It's completely different food, if you could even call it a food.
Yeah, and I like that you call out the point that corn is sugar, and we see corn in many different ways in our food supply. Corn sugar, high fructose corn syrup, maltodextrin. So let us talk a little bit about sugar, because one of the other Detox Summit experts, Dr. David Perlmutter, spoke about sugar as a toxin. So would you agree?
it's absolutely a toxin. It's the biggest probably toxin we have. It's poison. Honestly, that is my next book coming out in the fall is all on sugar, because I think if we could just focus on one thing and really call it out, it would be sugar. And what makes me the craziest about sugar is how the public is duped with it. Like, you'll go to the store and something says no sugar added, but yet it has fruit juice concentrate in there. Well, that's the worst thing you could get. And so, one of the questions in here is, so we've got sugar and we've got artificial sweeteners. Now, artificial sweeteners are more toxic than sugar is. Sugar's bad. Artificial sweeteners are way, way, way worse. And the very reason we created artificial sweeteners is so that diabetics, could have sweeteners without having problems with their blood sugar. But now we know that artificial sweeteners can actually create insulin problems too and cause weight gain. So much for that, besides being toxic. So artificial sweeteners, what you're seeing with those is people who eat sweet want more sweet. That's why fructose and artificial sweeteners are so problematic, but also that it can raise insulin, which causes fat storing, and then can be toxic. And remember, toxicity in itself causes weight loss resistance by lowering body temperature and by holding on to fat, because we're going to store toxins in our fat to protect ourselves. And then our body doesn't want to release that, because if it does, it's releasing toxins into your system. But sugar itself, I have to make a distinction, because there's, over 50 names for sugar in our country alone, but there is one type of sugar, fructose, that is the most problematic. And for some reason, because it's from, basically the top place you're going to find fructose in nature is in fruit, which is okay because it also comes with fiber and it comes with phytonutrients. And so in small amounts, 1 or 2 servings a day, if you're not insulin resistant, it can be okay. But when you take it and unwrap it and concentrate it either in a fruit juice concentrate it in, say, fruit juice, or unwrap it and create high fructose corn syrup, or just take straight fructose and use it in things, you create problems, because fructose bypasses the traditional path that the other sugars do, goes straight to the liver. So where we thought it was great was it didn't go into the bloodstream, raise insulin. It was like, it doesn't raise blood sugar, doesn't raise insulin. Cool, but not cool, because when you eat sugar and you raise blood sugar and insulin, you also trigger satiety signals. Your body goes, okay, we've had something. When you eat fructose, it goes straight to the liver, and hopefully you've got some room in the liver where you can store it as glycogen, which is stored energy, stored sugar, but there's not much room there. So generally, the majority of fructose is going to go straight into making fat, and it's bypassed the satiety signaling. So basically, you're making fat and you're still hungry, which is a really unfair place to be. Like, you look at it and go, that's not fair. And so agave, which, one of the challenges with a lot of the so-called healthy markets is you can walk in and think that you're on, sacred ground, but you're not, because they're using fruit juice concentrates, they're using agave, they're using honey, and people are like, oh, it's all natural, but it doesn't make it okay. Arsenic's natural.
So, if you think about it, babies from birth are drawn towards things that are sweet. It's like it's programmed within us to have something sweet, because it's part of survival and making sure that we have energy. So we're going to have something, right, in terms of a sweetener, or we'll be drawn to that, or we might start to crave it. So I'm just wondering, on the spectrum of sweetness, where would you say that we should go? And of course, there are going to be some that are worse than others, but if we have to choose based on what you're saying, obviously it sounds like the artificial sweeteners are way off to the other end of the spectrum where we shouldn't even touch those. But what are some, if we did want to start incorporating them into our way of eating in a healthier way, and just being realistic that we're going to have something sweet every now and then, what might be better choices?
Okay, so first thing I would shout out on is genetically, a sweet tooth and taste are very genetic. I happen to not have one. My adopted mom who raised me has a bad one. So actually, when I was raised, I developed a sweet tooth, because anyone will develop one. The more sweet you eat, the more sweet you want. But once I broke free of that, I don't really like sweet. And what I've seen with people, because I've already run almost 1,000 people through the next program, which is the sugar program, is you can get rid of that sweet tooth fairly quickly. But, some people do have more of a genetic sweet tooth. But I really think for the most part, because of artificial sweeteners and fructose, which are so much sweeter than regular sugar, we desensitize our sweet tooth and we start wanting progressively sweeter and sweeter foods. So a lot of this is to break free of that and retrain, reset your taste buds to appreciate the natural sweetness of, say, a blueberry, or raspberries. Berries are going to be one of my top favorites because they tend to have a lower sugar impact. They're lower in both glucose and fructose. And when you look at fruit, it's not just a matter of looking at glycemic load, and that's very important. A lot of people go, it's got low glycemic index, but apples have high fructose. So they're not one of the better choices in a fruit, which, up until 6 months ago, I was like, have an apple with almond butter. And then I looked at the fructose levels, and pears and apples have the highest fructose levels in fruit. So I'm not a fan. In fact, apple juice is probably it's worse than having a soda. Now, having said that, there are a lot of things that you can have that are great choices, but I want to just really put it out there that part of this is resetting your sweet tooth, reclaiming the sensitivity so that you do appreciate this natural sweetness. Because if you have been eating things using fruit juice concentrate, dried fruit, agave, honey, artificial sweeteners, you've lost it. Your sweet tooth's gone, okay, I want sweeter, 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 right? So you got to break it down. Now, here's things that I love to use. First off, vanilla, which helps raise serotonin naturally. And one of the reasons we can crave sugar besides genetics is due to stress, because stress, as we know, lowers serotonin. And then we want to eat something sweet to help drive 5-HTP in the brain to make more serotonin. So it gives you this elevated mood and crash. So that's one of them is vanilla. Cinnamon's great because it's naturally sweet and it balances blood sugar. Heating or freezing fruit also is going to draw out the sweetness, especially heating it up. So, heat up berries and use a little say dark chocolate sprinkles on top, and it's delicious. I use either dark chocolate 85% or 100%. So that's another one you can do, or raw cacao. And then my favorite sweeteners out there, but again, I'm going to say proceed with caution here on these. Xylitol from Birch, non-GMO erythritol, a fraction of stevia called Reb D, and then monk fruit. Now, one of the things we know about things that have no calories, and that's why I've always liked xylitol and erythritol, because they have a little bit of calories, so they won't tend to cause the calorie dysregulation phenomenon that artificial sweeteners do. And that when you think about it, stevia and monk fruit possibly could do is the study that they did with rats where they fed them sugar water and let them eat, and they ate what they needed to maintain their weight, but then they let them feed with a artificially sweetened water, and they again ate what they needed to maintain their weight. When they went back to having sugar water, they overate because they lost that ability to calibrate the degree of sweetness and the calories. So I do think we have to be careful with these things. Don't make it a free-for-all. But the cool thing with stevia and monk fruit is if you overuse them, they have a really weird aftertaste, so you won't tend to do it. And xylitol, same thing. You overuse xylitol, you're going to get gas. So, you have to use just little bits of these things. But again, I'm much more into let's reclaim your natural sweet sensitivity and start downscaling it and getting used to things going, wow, those berries are so sweet, right?
Just recalibrating. Yeah, that makes a lot of good sense. You did mention stevia, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit because I just returned from the Natural Products Expo. And of course, you see that there are trends, and a lot of the trends I was surprised to see that sucralose was being featured as part of a lot of booths, but also stevia, stevia, stevia. And I'm just wondering if stevia is the next agave. Primarily because stevia does change our taste palette. It is pretty intense. And even though it's generally regarded as safe, if you look at a lot of the science, it looks like it may not be all that safe based on what we see, whether it changes to the gut microflora, changes to the liver. And so I'm just wondering, do you have any hunch about stevia, or do you think that certain extracts might be okay?
So I wish I'd known you were at Expo West because I was there.
Oh,
And I always find to be the bizarrest thing to go to because it's the natural health products, and there's most of the stuff in there is so processed and such
yes.
crap that it's shocking. I'm like, well, sucralose and GMO soy, and this
Yeah.
is supposed to be healthy. However, so here's the deal with stevia. It's really going to come down to, I think what we're searching for is some kind of safe sugar. Sugar, if you look at it right now, is becoming the big focus, and which I'm thrilled about since I have a book coming out about it. But, with the World Health Organization just coming out with the 5% of all calories should come from sugar, and the American Heart Association saying 5 teaspoons for women and 9 teaspoons for men. The challenge is I look at what everyone's saying and they're saying added sugar. And I think what people aren't realizing is that, that's probably, yes, that's an issue, but what about the juice? What about the dried fruit? What about these things that people aren't considering as sugar, which really are sugar, So it's like we're really naive in the world of sugar, and we've got to take a much different look at it. And we also need to take a much different look at calling fructose out as well. I mean, you got to look at glycemic load and fructose. So stevia, I think, has some merits. I mean, there was a study that just came out about how helpful it is in diabetics. So, but again, the challenge is there's crap stevia, there's organic stevia, there's fractions of stevia, and you're going to get all of it lumped together. And there's a big difference between organic stevia and the other. Now, the challenge with stevia and xylitol and all these things is that they are ridiculously sweet. And what we don't want to do is just turn that sweet tooth on. And again, since stevia has no calories, you can still cause calorie dysregulation. So even though it's a way better option than, say, artificial sweeteners and a way better option than agave, it's not. We've got to be careful, and we've got to create can't make it a free for all. And I also look at it and kind of brings up this whole faux health food thing that makes me insane is, you look at what we're using these things in, and cookies and cupcakes, and it's like, stop it. Don't eat cookies and cupcakes, they're cookies and cupcakes, right?
Right.
I mean, just knock it off. And it's like, if you really have to have a cookie or a cupcake, and if you do this every once in a while, because it's not what you do every once in a while that creates the problem, it's what you do every day. I think when people think they can have some kind of healthy cookie or cupcake, all of a sudden they're eating this crappy faux health food every single day. And if once a month you had a really amazing cupcake, who cares? It wouldn't make a difference. But if every day you're eating this faux health food thing, yeah, that's going to be a problem, because you thought it was okay. You had the halo effect, as Brian Wansink talks about.
Exactly. And even for those people that are genetically programmed to crave sweet, it's almost like even that one cupcake can sometimes toss you into this pit of this roller coaster for the next couple of days.
It kind totally of tosses you. That's why I hate these, the intermittent fasting diet and the cheat days or cheat meals are completely bogus. First of all, if you're food intolerant, which is part of what I talk about in the Virgin Diet, if you have an issue with gluten or dairy or soy or corn or eggs or peanuts or sugar or artificial sweeteners, and I will be as bold to say that I would be shocked if you didn't, and you have a little bit of it, it's going to create a craving, it's going to create the food intolerance symptoms, and it's going to get you right back dialed in again. So you can't have just a little bit like basically just threw gasoline on a fire. So that idea of these cheat meals or having just a little bit's a problem. Now, if you've gone through and taken out all the foods for 3 weeks and then re-challenged and said, okay, you know what? I can have dairy. It doesn't cause problems for me. And you want to have like some ice cream once a month and it's not going to throw you under the bus. Hey, fine. But for most people, it's like if you have a little food intolerance, moderation's a myth. A little bit's going to create a big problem.
Exactly. And I'd like to track back to these artificial sweeteners because you are bringing them up, and I don't think that people recognize how profound the effects are on the body. And the one that I have most concern about is sucralose, otherwise known as Splenda.
Yes.
I'm seeing these huge baking totes at the store, and people are using a 1-to-1 comparison with sugar. And we haven't used artificial sweeteners like that before, right? It's just a sprinkle here, a sprinkle there. And now all of a sudden we're using big baking totes. So what's your feeling about Splenda?
Oh my gosh, stop baking anyway.
Yeah.
So to me, the most exciting area that we can really make changes in, and it shouldn't be an issue, by the way, but it is an issue because of the sugar and the artificial sweeteners, is the gut microbiome, the bacteria in our gut. And the scariest thing that Splenda does is feed the bad gut bacteria. And when you feed the bad gut bacteria, like we're more gut bacteria than we are, we're more bacteria than people, than cells. So this bacteria in our body is basically going to make the difference between us having amazing health or having horrible health, burning fat or storing fat. If you have too much bad gut bacteria, a condition called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which Splenda feeds, you actually extract more calories from the food you eat and store them as fat. I had a client, Suzanne Summers' stepdaughter, who couldn't lose weight. And she'd gone to every doctor, and she had this chronic gas and bloating, and they kept giving her, oh, we'll give you more probiotics, and and so one of the doctors called me and goes, oh, I think she just needs to exercise more, which I kind of listened to him, and I went, well, you know what? Exercise doesn't really help with weight loss. it
Mm-hmm.
helps, it helps maintain weight loss, and then it's going to help improve insulin sensitivity and all these other things. But like initially, that's not going to be the needle mover. But okay, let me meet her. And she's telling me, and I'm going, oh, huh. So she had some food intolerances. Eggs really threw her under the bus. And then she had this gut dysbiosis. We had to kill off the gut bacteria. And then she dropped the 40 pounds, and it was a non issue, never had a problem again. But people don't realize that. I mean, she wasn't eating that much, but what she was eating was just the message to her body. Again, is food's information. And the message she was getting was store fat, store fat, store fat. Besides the issue with toxicity to the thyroid with Splenda. And as you know, if you have low thyroid function, you're not losing weight. In fact, everything's going to be off. You're going to have higher cholesterol. You're going to be constipated. You're going to be depressed. You're going to have your hair fall out. You'll have no sex drive. You can't build muscle. Your skin's going to be dry. So you look at this and you go, these artificial sweeteners are the biggest joke. When you look at the research on them, it makes no sense. Headaches and the whole thing with like some of these seizure activity with them. When I have a son who was a victim of a hit and run accident and left for dead in the street and was in the ICU. And then he had major stuff going on, but major traumatic brain injury. And one of the hospitals wanted to give him Crystal Light. And I'm like, he's got a brain injury. We are not giving him artificial sweeteners. We're worried about seizure activity. Look at the studies, It's like, are you crazy? But just at the very basis of we're using these things because they don't have calories. I want us to really get off of calories. Yes, calories count, but where they come from counts more. But just because something has no calories doesn't mean that it can't create a message in your body that will make things go bad. So if you're eating something with no calories, but it's telling you, it's raising insulin, which then tells your body to store fat, or it's feeding gut bacteria, which then tells your body to store fat. It doesn't matter if you have calories or not. You, at the end of the day, will gain weight from that. And that's what the studies are now showing with these artificial sweeteners, especially, you've seen the studies where they look at someone drinking a regular soda versus someone drinking a diet soda. Higher risk of diabetes, higher waist circumference, more weight gains. Like, what else do you need to know here?
I wonder if it doesn't have something to do with the chemical structure of these artificial sweeteners. Because if you look at sucralose, it's essentially a disaccharide. It looks just like sugar, except it has 3 chlorine atoms hanging off. And if you know anything about chlorine, to the listeners, chlorine is a neurotoxin. So, JJ, what you're saying about brain health and being concerned about these sweeteners, it seems like there's a logical leap just even based on the chemical structure itself. I mean, sucralose started out as a pesticide. And then one of the scientists just happened to taste it and said, oh, wow, this is sweet. So
yeah, yes. I know people just knew that. It's like,
yeah, exactly. So it's interesting the history of these things and how they make our way into our food supply. So thanks for bringing that up about diabetes and how we really need to be on the watch for these sweeteners. They are really concerning.
But it really comes to, Deanna, people want to be able to have their cake and eat it too. I'm thinking of one popular diet book that's constantly on the New York Times bestseller, and the doctor says, and I'm not going to name names, so I'm tempted to. He says, you can have a diet soda every day. It's not the diet soda that's the problem. It's the habits around it. I'm like, you need to go back to school.
Yeah, or just send them the literature. I mean, it's like, all right there.
But you know what? People want that message more than they want this message, unfortunately. He also has people like they can have a glass of orange juice every day and chocolate-covered pretzels and a snack before bed. And I'm like, yikes, dude. But that's the stuff people want to hear. And that's what creates the problems out there in the the confusion. And it's so upsetting because honestly, I think one of the big messages here is this is really not hard. When you get the right food into your body, you're not hungry, you don't have cravings, you have amazing, steady, sustained energy, your weight totally stabilizes where it should be, you don't have joint pain and inflammation, your skin clears up, you look and feel younger than your age by far. It's just not hard. The challenge is there's so much misinformation out there that people tend to go towards that because it's like it's we're fighting against big information out there that's in the media. As you know, like I do a ton of TV, but I always have to temper my messages. I can't go in there on a complete rant against dairy, gluten, and soy. I'll never be asked back, because we've got advertisers paying for things. So I always have to frame these things correctly. But these forums, like what you've put together, give us an opportunity to really get that information out there. And that's important because it gives people back their hope. So many people do this and they go, I've tried everything and it just isn't working. But you've actually been following the wrong set of rules. What you've been trying are things that will never work because they're not following your own body's biochemistry. They're working against you, not with you. And that's why it feels like such a struggle and so hard and so frustrating, right?
It is. It's so frustrating to be in this deluge of misinformation. And, sometimes I'm wondering whether or not it's, why do we choose to listen to certain people? Is it to feed the message that we want to hear, which I think you alluded to? What's deeper? Do you think that our craving for things that are sweet are really signaling to us that we've got emotional things to look at? We need to look at our thought patterns. Are we really craving just sweetness in our lives? I'm curious to get your thought on that as to whether or not we need to look at more of our lives and see why we're craving things that are sweet.
Well, I think especially with women is we tend to put ourselves last on the list. We don't do things to take care of ourselves. And kind of one of the things we really can do is like sneak a cookie here and there, right?
As a reward, right?
And hey, food is a drug. Sugar, gluten, and dairy are the biggest drugs. They have an opiate-like effect on the brain. And when it's been a crappy day and no one said, I mean, how often I'm a mom, I've got 2 teenage boys, and I've got one recovering from a brain injury and I run 2 companies. And I don't really on a regular basis have someone say, you're doing a really good job. And thank you so much for making dinner for me. And thank you for, you know what I mean? It's like,
right.
Some days you're like, what the heck, So you can see how we start to use these things as, when food, Janine Roth has a great series of when food is love. And I do think one of the things I'm always looking at with people is, okay, go join Massage Envy, go get a pedicure, do stuff to take care of yourself. It's okay. Self-love is selfless when you really look at it because you will be the best mom, the best employer or employee, when you really start with being in a good space. And I think we tend to not do that. And so we're like, screw it, I'm having a cookie. It's been a crappy day.
It's the shortcut to those things. But I really like what you said about having self-love is really selfless, that we're really connecting into something that will make us even better in the world. So, so important for women to hear that message.
Yes, we have to be first on the list. I will tell you, Deanna, this is a little tad off subject, but I think it's really important to get out there. I was working with a client. We set all our goals and she didn't do them. And I came back and I go, well, okay, I'm going to have to fire you because, we set all this up. But I go, but I don't understand. Like, you were really focused. She'd had a major health scare. She's the sole support of her family. So she knew she needed to do this and she was very committed. And then she didn't do it. I go, explain to me what came up, like what's in the way. Well, she said it's been a really busy couple of weeks and she started going through everything that she did. She took care of this person, this person, that, right? And finally we got all through it. And the final thing on her list was to get life insurance so that she could take care of her kids if she died. I go, so let me get this straight. Like, you just went through your top list of everything you did. You were nowhere on the list. The only thing that made the list that related to you was you getting life insurance so that if you died, you could still take care of them.
Oh my
goodness.
You
didn't just take care of yourself. Do you not see how tweaked this is, right?
So did you end up firing her, or is she now on her path to to getting some self-love?
Yeah, that was helpful because it made her, because again, what she realized was she was taking these shortcuts like you talk about, the cookie and this, because she wasn't taking the time to say stop. What do I need to do to really take care of myself? How do I set these things in place? This is where I find it's very different working with men than women. The men will put what they need in place to support them, their support staff, their team, just so they can do this. And it's like, so figure out what you need to do to take care of your health and to be healthy. And if you won't do it for yourself, if you feel guilty doing that, do it for your kids, do it for your spouse, do it for your friends, because ultimately, when you do these things and you step up and do that, it's not what you say, it's how you do it, it's how you live, it's who you are. And when you do this stuff, people notice and they will start emulating you. And all of a sudden, your transformation becomes a transformation, basically for the world, not just for you, not just for your kids, but you start to impact future generations. And especially in toxicity, I think there are two things that are most devastating to our health: stress and toxicity. Those are the two major health concerns that we did not have even 100 years ago. We never had chronic stress and we didn't have chronic toxicity. And so when you look at this, if we don't fix these issues now, toxicity amplifies as it gets passed through the generations.
It's true. If we've got to tackle it. And JJ, based on what you're saying too, I think that toxicity comes in different forms. It comes in the environmental forms that you spoke of with food, air, and water. And then also the toxicity in relationships and thoughts and emotions, and we're just really getting our life on track, and if we can work on both of those sides, then we're on a good path.
Yep. And it's a constant, it's constant work. It's a constant journey.
It is. Well, we've been through a journey in this interview, and it's been just wonderful. I really appreciate your wisdom and everything that you've shared. And what I'm wondering is if you can summarize for the listeners 3 main takeaways, 3 actionables. You're a very action-oriented person. So what can people do based on everything that you said, if we can just distill it down?
Okay, so
I know it's a tall order.
Well, the first thing is nothing happens without a decision. So the first thing is when you look at all this stuff, because I think so often we just have given up and we've just settled. And what my goal is always in an interview is to have people go, wow, well, what if I could just pull these 7 foods out for 3 weeks and get rid of a lot of these chronic problems? What would that do for me? Where would my life go? And maybe the things I have been trying haven't been working. And it doesn't mean that I'm just doomed to be here. My fat's not my fault. I could change these things quickly. So the first thing is, make that decision that things can be different and you can change them and you can change them quickly, and look at some inspired goals, because there's always going to be challenges that come up. But if you have a bigger reason out there, like when my son was in the ICU and coma on life support, I couldn't be sick. So I took my self-care up to the most extreme level of sleep and having Whole Foods delivered to the hospital and running the hospital stairs so I could be fully present for him and focus and make the right decisions that basically saved his life. So what's the inspired goal or goals that really get you excited? And then, take your action plan. I'm going to say, hey, do the Virgin Diet, because honestly, I see what it does for people and it's so darn simple. And so, pull those 7 foods out for 3 weeks. You're going to make easy swaps in there. It's simple. You can do it. And 3, surround yourself with people who will support you. There's nothing more powerful than accountability and support. So if that's a friend who will help you go through the process, or a spouse. I mean, we have one family who's lost over 350 pounds, and this woman who had such poor health, she was barely leaving the house, is now vibrant and out in the community. So get that person or people, that community. You can even go online if you don't have people around you, which is also a critical thing. Jim Rohn talks about income and how your income's tends to be the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Well, I think you extend that to your fitness level, your weight, your mindset, your positivity, your life. So, might be time to start to look at people you can surround yourself with who are really, out there to make a difference and transform and be positive too, and go for it, because hey, we get like every day passes by. You get one shot.
You get one shot. That's right. And we're seeing it in the science, the power of community. Dr. Mark Hyman, who's also speaking as part of the summit, also talks about that. So I think your message is just incredible. It's inspiring, it's informative, and we want to stay connected to you, JJ. So how do we do that? What are your websites and how do we get your books?
Books are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and I just came out with New York Times bestseller now, The Virgin Diet Cookbook, and
I
then
saw that.
yay,
Congratulations.
thank you,
Yeah.
awesome recipes, very yummy. And then of course jjvirgin.com is probably the easiest place to get everything. Is there. We have a bunch of websites, but that'll direct you to everything. And at some point I want to be able to spend some time with you too, getting to hang out. So just
Well,
putting it out there, Deanna.
all right. Well, I like the sound of that. Thank you again for being part of this movement. I call it a movement. It's not just a 1 week informational gathering. There's really something here that we can get inspired and change ourselves, which will change the planet. So thanks for being a part of this.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm honored.